Today, you will discover the best trading view indicators for price action trading and smart money strategies. I use these top trading view indicators every day, and their help is outstanding. We will look at three different price action trading view indicators. First indicator is about market imbalance points to identify specific entries and target points. Second indicator is about the institutional level support and resistance areas. The last indicator is about volume trading to identify supply and demand zones combined with a market structure break. These indicators are amazing. Please keep watching. I'll be using these indicators a lot in free price action strategies and the smart money trading course that I teach in this channel. If you're ready, let's start. The first indicator that I would like to talk about is one of my recent favorite indicators, and it works amazingly. It's called Imbalance Finder Indicator. Please do not worry, imbalance is one of the most important price action trading concepts. I'll do 2 videos about it very soon. But first, let's understand the basics of it. What is imbalance? It's simply quick dumps or pumps that create imbalance and gaps in the market. It is an absence of balance between buy and sell orders. So it's unnatural. Very high percentage of imbalances are corrected. It could take an hour, a day, a week, or even months, but most of the time it is corrected. So there will be a healthy price action. What are my settings? Luckily, there are no settings needed for the imbalance finder. I just made it look a soft transparent gray in my charts, so it blends well with my charts without confusing me. You can use any color that you want. How to use imbalance finder indicator is again very simple. First thing is that I focus on large imbalances rather than the small ones. So my main style is using reaction trades. As you can see, there are 3 big significant imbalances here. So what you do is set your alarms to these big imbalances. Once the imbalances are filled, there will be reactions most of the time. As I said at the beginning of the video, imbalances, as the name suggests, is unnatural and it needs to be corrected. Do not worry, imbalances are a core part of price action trading, and I'll prepare great videos for them. Let's see a real trade that I took. What you are looking at is a 30-minute time frame. As you can see the imbalance right here. I also made a high time frame analysis with 1 hour and 2 hours time frames and found other imbalances. And took a note of a demand area. My trading idea was very simple. Once the imbalances are filled, I knew that there would be a reaction. As you may see, the price reacted really well after correcting and filling the imbalances. I made over 30% profit with this trade. One other thing, you can also use imbalances as profit targets. As you can see, there is also another mini imbalance here. This one I used as a target and profit taking point because I trusted that the imbalance was going to be filled. Imbalances are everywhere. Sooner or later, most of the imbalances are filled and corrected for healthy price action. There is an indicator that I use all the time before opening a position. The indicator is called as Spaceman Key Levels. This indicator is very special. It shows the special price levels as high, low, and mid levels. These are considered as institutional levels. As a trader, you should watch key price levels and these institutional areas regularly before opening a positions. I mostly use the indicator before opening the position to check if there is a support or resistance levels that helps my trade or blocks my trade. Let's talk about settings. Honestly, I do not play with settings so much. I do not use the mid levels a lot. What I do is disable all the mid levels. Okay, how to use this? The idea is very simple. If the price is above the lines, like daily open, weekly high, low, anything, all those areas are possible support lines, like demand areas. If the price is under these areas, those zones are like resistance levels or supply areas. See, another way of identifying supply and demand areas. It's not that hard. However, never use this indicator alone. For example, assume there is an order block, imbalance, and a very strong institutional price level at the same area. What does this tell you? It means that there could be a strong reaction. The last indicator is a version of a volume profile that I use so much. Unfortunately, you'll need a Pro Tradingview subscription to use this indicator. But trust me, it is well worth it. It's called Fixed Range Volume Profile. So unlike the giant volume profile on the right, this tool helps me to see specific parts. Think of this tool as a Fibonacci retracement tool. It makes you identify the specific entry zones, supply and demand areas. What are my settings? These settings mostly present visual appearances and do not change the nature of the indicator. I set the row size and value area volume settings to 100. This is my preference. You can set it to anything you want. Other than that, I'm mostly interested in the POC line, which is the point of control, which is the highest volume activity level of the selected range. I set the colors to transparent yellow and the POC as bright white. As you can see, all other settings are disabled. I do not use them. Let's see a couple of examples of how to use this indicator. First of all, you have to know what market structure breaks are. I will not go over it again and again. Please start watching the free price action trading course that I teach on my YouTube channel. As you remember, in our market structure break strategy, our entry zone is between the deepest lower low and the lower high that creates it. So, what I do with the indicator is draw from lower high to the deepest lower low. As you can see, I identified the POC, which is a demand area in the entry zone. Magically, it is another sniper entry. Also, you have learned one more way of identifying a demand zone. Let's check a supply example. After confirmation of market structure break and identified the enter zone, I'm drawing a fixed range from higher low to the deepest higher high. I identified the POC, point of control. This time it is the supply area. Again, Magically price comes back and hits the exact point for entry. Entry zones are golden zones. You will find so many entry points with specific tools. Do not worry, I'll do a whole video sessions about these TradingView indicators, volume profile and fixed ranges, and how to do sniper entries with them. Please do not forget to subscribe to the channel for new videos. Take care and see you soon.